Good evening and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Dr. Chitra Anand. She is the Managing Director, ESG and Impact, a professor at Centennial College, a researcher and author, a keynote speaker, a recipient of the Changemakers Award by the Globe and Mail, and an author of a really interesting, I thought, thought-provoking post recently about turning 50. And so I thought we'd reach out to Dr. Chitra Anand and talk about why turning 50 was such a big deal and what she did to celebrate it and what some of her thoughts were that she put down on paper. Dr. Chitra Anand, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Brian. Thank you.
So was turning 50 a big issue?
I wouldn't say it was a big issue. I would definitely say it's a milestone for anybody in life. I think that, half a century is huge. And so for me, it was important to reflect. I'm a deeply reflective person, as you know, Brian. So, to really kind of think about career, life, goals, family, how do you kind of bring it all together and ensure that you've accomplished the things that you wanted to do, and then, kind of think about the next, several decades on the things that you want to do.
I thought some of your posts were interesting. You
Mm.
said, Mommy, I turned 50. She said, You look like a teenager. Funny enough, at times I still feel like a teenager. I don't feel my age in so many different ways, but mainly it's in my mind and
Yeah.
spirit. My mind remains youthful, optimistic, hopeful, and grateful. I've been spending a lot of time reflecting about age, life, career, and why people feel the way they do and others feel other ways. As I enter the second half, I wanted to share some thoughts on what I've learned and observed along the way. I hope that you find it insightful. Tell me, what have you learned along the way?
Um, well, that's a big question. It's a loaded question. So I guess I'll take it, from a few dimensions, but it's interesting because my mom is 88. Her health has been declining rapidly. And so I went to go see her, and my general emotive, Brian, is I don't feel my age. And so for me, it was like a really
I
hard
I
thing.
I never would have guessed you at 50. So I have to admit that.
Thank you. And whether it's by design or, people have said, well, you've got Indian genes in you with this youthfulness. But I really do believe it's the life that you live and the practice that you do, the content that you fill your mind with, the company that you keep, the organizations where you work, what you read. All of that contributes, like diet, exercise, all of the things that might seem obvious to us, but it really, really does impact how you feel and therefore how you look and your whole persona. So if we take it like from one dimension, I don't feel my age. Um, I feel like I'm in my 20s and 30s from an overall spirit perspective, how I feel, the way I think. Um, I'm fascinated with, different parts of culture and life, and I try and educate myself and surround myself with, different generations because it keeps you youthful, whether it be, from a business perspective or pop culture or trends, but just even from an overall mindset because you learn so much. And I include my kids in that. My kids are 9 and 11, and I learned so much from them. And you maintain this youthfulness, this, one of the things that I even talked to my father about, who's in his 80s, mid late 80s, is, you when we start to age, we run the risk of losing our childlike inner child. And that inner child that we have needs to maintain, this, it needs to stay alive. And it's that inner child that keeps you youthful. And so, in my post, I said, one of the best things that you can do for yourself and even for your children is to learn to have a sense of humor. We talk about that, and I've been studying the brain, and I'm writing up my second book and looking at the neuroscience of innovation and some of the neurons that are transmitted that need to be transmitted when you're talking about innovation. But like when you're laughing, it releases all kinds of positive neurons and dopamine and serotonin, and it just also takes the edge off of life. Like when things get, absurd from a career perspective or dealing with people and, the complexities of life. Like look at the modern world that we're living in and all of this, awful things that are happening, just with the news of Maui, and it's really upsetting. But, you need to, you know, have this positive mindset to help sort of navigate the complexities of the modern world. I mean, and so
So, so
I
stay so stay young, humor,
yes,
positive mindset
yeah,
are key. Now, I got to ask you. One thing you said was a little bit surprising. You have a 9 and 11-year-old.
yeah,
So you're 39 when you had your first child,
yes. 42 with my second. Yes.
and at 50, I had 20-year-olds. And so some people would think that 39, 42 is too late to have children. Tell me about have they kept you young?
Of course. They've saved me in so many different ways. Absolutely. And I applaud you for having them younger. I just didn't have that opportunity. And I think we talked about this before in our last Roe v. Wade interview, is just, I didn't meet the right person until later in life. And I wish I met them sooner so that I could have had more kids. I tried to have more kids, but unfortunately it didn't work out for me. But absolutely, they keep you young. The things that are their interests become your interests. So, for example, both of them play competitive basketball. So I've had to learn the game of basketball in order to support them. And I started managing and coaching some of their teams. And it keeps you youthful because it also, we've talked about this before, but it intersects business as well. Like I've learned a lot from team sports that intersect the way we manage teams, the way we inspire teams. So, I'm all about being multidimensional and taking from different parts of your life that can make it more fulsome rather than just have this like one lens. And you can do that through different ways on how you live life.
I really enjoyed coaching
Yeah.
my kids, not soccer, but not basketball, but soccer and hockey and rugby, and it was a lot of fun. I've become obsessed with this show Ted Lasso. I'm not sure if you've watched it
Yes.
on
Yes.
TV, but what do you think? Does this optimism, don't play to win, but play to become a better person, team spirit actually work?
I think so. I mean, it's interesting question because, we often have taught, even just from a competitive perspective in business, you want to compete to win, you want to compete to win. I think that winning is a natural byproduct of hard work. So if you're focused on just winning, you're not actually focused on perfecting your skill. So when you perfect your skill, and the way you approach a game or a career or new things that you want to develop in terms of new world of work and skill development, you will ultimately win in some capacity. It might not be right up front, but it will be at some point in life. So I'm all about perfect the skill. Winning will be a byproduct, a natural byproduct of the perfection of the skill.
It's interesting. There was the study I read recently. I should
Yeah.
probably, before I quote it to a smart person like you, find the reference. But it took a bunch of smart people that had done a test, and half of them they rewarded with "you did great on the test," and the other one you did good at hard work, and
Yes.
congratulations for the hard work. And they found the people that were just congratulated for victory,
Yes.
actually the second time the test was administered, actually did more poorly. But the people that were recognized for their hard work continued to work hard,
Yeah.
and did far better the second time around. And so the conclusion
Yes.
was it's far better to recognize people for hard work than it is for the actual achievement, because you want them to keep
Yes.
working hard.
Interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. And the reason, I mean, one of the things I wanted to share with you as well is like I've got like 3 or 4 books like this that are full of notes. And so one of the things that I do is a practice. And I think one of my points was progress is the key to happiness. Like I'm not a
I found that interesting in the way that
yeah,
you actually connected it up with positive neurotransmitters. I
yeah,
wanted to take a break, if we could, for some messages and come back and ask you about your first point, which is, as you just mentioned, progress is the key to happiness, and that this releases positive neurotransmitters. Sounds fascinating. I want to hear what neurotransmitters are. We're going to be back in just 2 minutes, chatting about turning 50 and what Dr. Chitra Anand thought about it all. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Dr. Chitra Anand. She has written recently an interesting post about turning 50 and what she learned from it all. Dr. Chitra Anand is really quite an interesting person. Let me just tell you a little bit about her educational background. She's got an MBA from Northwestern University, Kellogg School of Management, an authentic leadership program, a diploma from Harvard Business School, a research doctorate from the University of Bradford, a BCom in business from Wilfrid Laurier University, and an associate's degree in organizational leadership from Harvard University. And then she turned it into really quite an impressive career. She has done so many different interesting things. She was the director of operations at OpenText, a part-time professor at the International School of Business at Seneca, a client service manager, a senior program manager, a director of communications and strategic initiatives, a director of marketing at TELUS, where you spent 9 years and progressed through the organization. Then you were the chief brand and communications person for Microsoft for 4 years. And then you were the advisor to the CEO at Astound Group in Toronto, San Francisco, and Las Vegas. I got to ask you about that at some point in time. A doctor of business at University of Bradford in entrepreneurship, a partner in brand management thought leadership, an advisor to the chief executive officer at Mavericks Private Equity and then Sign, a managing director and partner of ESG and Impact Clarity Strategic Advisors, a keynote speaker, a professor at Centennial College, an advisory board member at the University of Ottawa and the Life Research Institute, an advisory board member at Ford's School of Business and Technology, and now an advisor to the chief executive officer of the Social Architects. Wow. Quite the career.
Thank you.
And then your very first point is about progress.
Yes.
You've done progress.
Yes. And, it's interesting because, I think I showed you before, like, okay, I have about 3 or 4 books like this that are filled. And I started writing it in my 20s. And the purpose of that, and I think it was just this thing that I started to do where I'd start to write down my goals for the year, whether it's travel, it's career. I remember wanting to do my MBA at the time. I started a career at TELUS, and then I started to break it up into quarters. What am I going to do this quarter, second quarter, third quarter? And then you hit your birthday and you're like, what did I do this year? What are my goals for the year? And one of the things that I found, Brian, and I just did this very naturally, is that if you don't take flight of the things that you want to do and put pen to paper, they're not going to happen. There's a magic, and whether it's intent or deliberation, but you hold yourself accountable for the things that you want to do. I have things in my book where I want to learn a new language, right? I started taking, I spoke French all through high school and university, and I wanted to ensure that I maintained my French speaking language. And, I want to ensure that I take courses. So whatever that is. And so what it forces you to do is not just set goals, but really hold yourself accountable. Like, did I achieve what I wanted to do? Like in my book as well, I never ran a marathon. I never was a runner. I ran the New York Marathon. I never knew how to swim as an adult. I didn't know how to swim. And so I taught myself in my adulthood how to swim, and I did a half Ironman in BC. And so maybe those were big, lofty goals. But my point is, if you don't force yourself to think about the things that you could possibly do or some really cool things, then they'll never get done. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is like, yeah, I'm 50. I'm worried about midlife crisis. And I think that, and again, I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist by any means, but through my deep thinking and reflection Yes. So as I was saying, Brian, is I make it very intentful and deliberate to take accountability of the things that you want to do in life, because if we don't, then life just slips by. So I've always made that a practice. And one of the things that I've realized is that, our society is plagued with depression and anxiety, and a lot of, and I've talked to a lot of people, and, in my humble opinion, and my thesis is, if we can progress, progression is a human need. It's a, I talk about this in my research, the theory of evolution. It's a very natural process. And if we're not evolving and progressing as human beings, not just even from a societal perspective, but personal perspective, that's when things start to break down. So I've made it, and I share this with my peer group, my friend group, my family, my friends, that, the need to constantly do things that are meaningful, intentful as it relates to everything, not just specifically career, but whether or not you've got athletic goals, physical goals, family goals, personal growth goals, things with, the travel goals, whatever that may be. It's important to write them down and for you to take full accountability of the things that you want to do. And that really helps you monitor and track your level of happiness to some extent as you navigate life.
So, lots of people have got dreams, lots of people have got goals, and most people never reach them. I think the statistic is that people make New Year's resolutions and that
Sure.
80-90% of them are dropped within a month. So
yes.
What's the secret to turning these goals into actual reality and progress in your mind?
Yes, it's a great question. Set a deadline. Put a date. I want to do this by this date. Done. Period. And then you force yourself. It's that book, Atomic Habits. How do you drive change? You have to start with small changes, right? I mean, I wanted to run a marathon. I never ran in my life, Brian, but I didn't even know how to run. But you start small, right? You do 5K, you do 7K, then you do 8K, then you do 10K. And then before you know it, you've hit the 32-kilometer mark, and then you can do the rest. So it's these small things, but you have to commit. You have to commit, and you have to drive habitual change in your behavior. And it's these small things that lead to big things, And similarly, like I had a dream to write a book. Lots of people do. And we have got tons of ideas, but you have to make it a practice to start logging, thinking, writing down thoughts, blogging, start to compile things together. Like we learn by doing, but we also progress by doing. And I'm all about turn that into actionable things that you have to do, and you have to force yourself to do that.
Okay, I understand all that. But then you went on and said that when you actually do this progression,
yeah.
they release positive neurotransmitters that are essential for psychological and psychological processes.
Yes.
What are neurotransmitters that are released by progress?
All the good ones, dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, everything. I mean, even think about it like, I'm studying my kids. They're on this journey to perfect their skills in basketball, right? They've been practicing. I said, listen, if you want to perfect something, go and practice daily. Take your 100 shots every day. And then what happens at the end, they make their shots and their mood is boosted immediately. And we're the same. Like if you say, when I said that I want to write a book and I start to, I finish my first chapter, that progression, that completion of what it is that I set out to do releases dopamine in your brain, serotonin in your brain, that actually helps with your physiology in terms of how you feel, in terms of how you think, and then that just motivates you greater to continue to do those things. It's a very natural process.
I think there's some other secrets that have worked for me. Let me test them on you. And I think Ted Lasso had it with the believe sign that was on the wall that you looked at, and it took maybe 3 seasons before people actually did believe. So it takes a while. But as you said, writing it down is important. For me, it's also posting it, putting it on the wall, reading it every day or glancing at it every day, and doing it in a way that maybe not everybody publicly, but a couple of people important to you can see it, so that they become your accountability buddy, your accountability person. Because when you want to achieve something and you publicly state it and other people know it becomes more difficult to not go achieve it. When I was at Harvard Business School, I ended up failing a marketing exam. I wasn't as smart with marketing as you obviously are, and I decided that I was not going to be an admissions mistake, and I wanted to be. And they give it one award at Harvard Business School called the George Baker Scholar, and I was out with my then wife. I cried. It was like devastating, and I decided then and there that I was going to be a George Baker Scholar. I was going to work hard. I was not going to be an admissions mistake. I wrote down George Baker Scholar on a piece of dry cleaning cardboard. I posted it to my wall. Anyone that came over to my bachelor apartment would have seen the sign right above my desk, George Baker Scholar. 2 years later, guess what I was?
That's amazing.
And it's interesting because I think that the failure in that marketing exam probably was the kick in the pants that I needed to work hard. And I worked damn hard for 2 years. But I do think that the writing it down, putting it on the wall, looking at it every day, and knowing that other people knew that that was my objective made it very difficult to not work hard enough to actually achieve that objective.
Okay, so you said something really interesting, though, that I'd like to unpack a little bit. You said that the failure forced you to work harder. For some people, failure would demotivate them from working, right? Because even going back as a mature student and as a professional, we're dealing, now we're a little bit more in our skin, and we're dealing with all sorts of things like our ego and our pride and time, and voyeurism, if you will. And that in itself is difficult to do. Like, so one of the things that I also was thinking about, and I think I had mentioned this in the post, is not being so stuck in your own head. And if you fail, our automatic reflex as an adult is like, screw that, I'm not going to do that anymore because I don't have time for it. But to take a few steps back and to really think about, okay, I failed, so that's a big deal. I need to go back and really dive into, why did I fail? What do I need to change? That takes a lot. That takes a lot as a individual and as a professional person, because you have to have this very honest conversation with yourself. So most, a lot of people, that's a hard conversation to have. I'm not going to say most people can't, but I'm just saying, I'll give you an example. When I was doing my doctorate, my class started with 30 people. And these are people from all over the world, all over all continents of the world, very senior executives. By the end, only 3 remained. And I was one of 3, because you fail, assignments get rejected. You're given very candid feedback on the things that and it's hard to hear. It's hard to hear. So you have to make a decision on, are you prepared to hear the feedback, and are you able to learn, and are you able to make those changes, and do you want to do that? And those are really hard questions, because we're human, we're flawed. Like, we don't want to hear what's wrong with us. But if you're open, right? If you have a gateway of opening that I want to do this, or I want to evolve and I want to learn, like, that's magic. So I say kudos to you for being able to do that, because that's not easy.
Your second one was surround yourself with people who truly value you.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, that's so important. And I mean, not just personally, but professionally. You know, we've got a problem in organizations. Like, I hear so many stories about toxic workplaces, being amongst people. I mean, I just had a colleague leave one of her firms, not because of the work, but because of environment. Most people leave work because of environment, not because of the work.
I heard it was most people leave jobs because of bosses. Most people fire their bosses.
Yeah, sure. Bosses, environment, people, values, beliefs, you know, and the beauty of being a little bit older, right? At 50, you're like, I don't want to be around people who don't truly value what it is that you bring to the table. Um,
You
and
said
for
that you said that these valued relationships were rare relationships. Do you really
they
think there's only a few people you can have those valuable relationships with?
I think so. I think that, well, in the workplace, and even, I mean, I think that people are afraid to be vulnerable. I think that people are afraid to truly, be who they are because of, you know, how we're confined in certain organizations. There's, there's a problem right now. Like, there's lots of, I mean, why are organizations so focused on culture? We've got a culture problem. Okay, well, culture dictates business. If you don't have a strong culture, you're not going to thrive from a business perspective. And you don't really know what happens inside the bowels and guts of a company until you're there, right? We hear about Amazon and all the big tech and some of these things that blow up, and you don't really know until you're actually in it. So, my feedback to that is, you need to really, it's like this analogy. Put a flower in the desert and it'll die. But if you put a flower in the right environment, it will thrive. So environment really does dictate whether you thrive or not. And a huge part of that is not the physicality of the environment, but the people that you surround yourself are in that environment. And that's critical, like critical, critical, critical. So you might be the most brilliant person, but if you're in the wrong place, you're done. And so that's why it's so important to be around people who truly know your skills, your value, your capabilities, your growth potential, etc.
It's interesting. Richard Florida professor at Rotman wrote a book. I think it was called Who My City or something like that. And he talked about how important it is to choose the right mate in life, the right city that you want to live in, because those are the people you're going to be interacting with, and the right company that you want to work for.
Yeah.
And I guess that comes to your relationships. Your number third suggestion was do the hard things, which I agree with completely. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back and talk about doing the hard things. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Dr. Chitra Anand. She is a very smart lady. She has had communications jobs and marketing jobs her whole career. She went back and did a doctorate. She's written a book. She's done a marathon. She's done what was it, a half Ironman that you did? Fantastic. And you've turned 50, and you wrote a bit about what it was like turning 50 and what you thought about turning 50. And your first suggestion was progress is the key to happiness. The second was surround yourself with people who truly value you. And the third that I want to talk about now is do the hard things and make it a practice. Tell me about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we as human beings put the hard things out to the last things that you want to do. I've always been of the mindset, even when I started working, I'm like, let me do the hard things first, because the hard things are the things that you want to get out of the way, and it changes you. So I used to start to do that, even just from a daily perspective on small work things. But, as I, through my 20s and 30s and 40s, I found like I would, and I think I told you this, I had big, big, lofty goals, like doing a half Ironman. I didn't even know how I did it, but I did it. It was hard. The training was hard. The discipline was hard. It took me, just sub 8 hours to finish. But at the end of it, when you push yourself, there's something that happened. It's like a mental physical connection. And I talk a lot about the mental physical connection. But when you break boundaries on the physicality of your body, something happens to your brain. Your brain kind of regenerates or resets, or something happens to your brain, and you cross a chasm where you can get this mindset that you're able to accomplish anything, right? I mean, and similarly, like, if you take on big goals, like learning a new language or doing a big trip or doing a big hike, you want to hike Machu Picchu or whatever you want to do, take on those big things, because something magical happens when you cross these big, big, lofty goals. It releases something very positive in your brain, and it evolves you, it forces you, and the most important thing is that you prove yourself wrong. And I think that's amazing, right? Like, you're like, I don't think I can ever do this. But when you prove yourself wrong, that's when things start to really kick in.
You're right. Disproving yourself and breaking limits that you somehow put on yourself is one of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself.
Yes.
Breaking
Absolutely.
barriers.
Yes. I mean, we talk about, women in tech and breaking ceilings and breaking barriers. I mean, why are we doing all this? We talk about pay equity and women in the workplace, and, we have to, and not just in the workplace, but, you want to take it outside of that. Right. So look at the different things that you're doing in life. Like I said earlier, if you want to do a doctorate or write a book or run a marathon or do a big trip or, change a habit or behavior, all of those things that are really, really hard to quit smoking, if you're a smoker, like, those are big things, but you have to commit to it. And once you do that, it translates into other things, and it leads to big progress in life and career.
Your fourth is energy and time are the most precious commodities. And I think a lot of people understand about how important time is. We waste it a lot. But then you make a really interesting comment. People and companies will deplete them, and you need to find ways to restore them, and also ones that equally fuel them. A lot of people don't, I think, realize that people can deplete your time and your energy so completely.
100%. And, I spoke about that. I mean, it's all kind of linked, right? Like, the other point around finding people that truly value you. I mean, you can go into a work organization and, language, tone, work approach, it can be depleting. And you'll know right away, right? You feel your energy comes down. Or you can go to an environment that's, highly efficient, very positive, You're aligned to your belief system, and that is uplifting. Sometimes we have the boldness to identify it, sometimes we don't. But my point is, those are I mean, I've got kids, you've got kids. I mean, I was a young mother starting like working at Microsoft, starting my opportunity there, and then doing my PhD on the side and writing a book as well. So your time is very limited. And so you want to ensure, pardon me?
Use it wisely.
Absolutely. It's very limited. I chose not to go out for cocktails at night because I prefer to go to a yoga class because yoga restored my energy, right? So you have to really understand what is it about yourself that restores it. Maybe you'd need to go and socialize, but it depends on what you need in order to restore that. So really have a deeper understanding of yourself.
Your fifth is really interesting, and I don't really quite understand it. So maybe you can help me here. Self-estimation is essential. So this isn't self-awareness.
No.
Self-estimation. Tell me about what self-estimation is, please.
Yes. I've been thinking a lot about what makes people successful and unsuccessful. And I really believe it is their confidence levels. The confidence to do well in life, do well in your career. And having confidence, what does that mean? That means, how do you assess who you are? How do you estimate your own self? What do you think about yourself? And I find this, and I've been getting into this with my kids, because I really do believe that confidence is the key to success. That confidence is what will dictate what they will do. So one of them, and I see it all the time. He can be so hard on himself and have a really shitty game at basketball. But when I say, okay, you need to turn that talk into something a little bit more positive and constructful, he'll have a better game. We talk about the brain. It is the messaging that we send into our system. What is the messaging that we're sending to ourselves? And then we carry that through in our adolescence, into our young adulthood, and into work. What is it that we do? How do we assess who we are? And that projects in how you behave, and how you communicate, and how you write, and how you present, and how you show up. So that is absolutely essential.
So I agree that it's essential, but I find that some people are overly confident without justification because they're not self-aware. And so I've always thought that you also need self-awareness, because you need to be confident authentically with knowledge of who you are and what you're capable of, because otherwise it'll come off as cocky and egotistical and overconfidence. And Amy Cuddy, an author in the United States, wrote a book called Presence, and she didn't use the word confidence because similarly, she thought sometimes too much confidence, not justifiable, becomes overconfidence and over self-confidence and is bad. How do you think about this self-awareness versus confidence versus overconfidence?
Well, I don't disagree with your statement at all, Brian. But what I'm saying is, so that's why I said self-estimation. Because when you're really thinking about yourself and what you're capable of, you're also having an honest conversation on your strengths and your weaknesses. So that's why I said this is not an egotistical view of yourself, right? Like, it's not about, you have to, I think it's a natural relationship around self-awareness, confidence, and what your belief system is, which is what do you believe about yourself? Because then you're able to focus on your strengths and know what your weaknesses are, right? So it is a deeper rooted comment when I say self-estimation. Like, so having that sense of who you are also incorporates a high degree of self-awareness. So you have to be a highly intuitive person in order to really grasp it.
Your next one is move your body daily and sweat, which lots of people will say, but then you say sweat is the natural process for your body to remove toxins from your body.
Yes, of course. We know that, right? Like, it's when you're dripping in sweat, you also get a natural high, right? Like if you get this release of all kinds of positive, dopamine, all the good stuff. It's a total detoxification of your body. So, I've always said, like, I need a good sweat because your body absorbs so much on a daily basis, whether it's stress, whether it's people coming at you, whether it's your kids, whether it's family, and your body can only take so much, right? It's inward absorbing. And every day you need to release it. That's why, I go for runs. I'm drenched in sweat. I do hot yoga. You are a hot, sweaty mess after, but you get a natural high. It is a total a release of all of the things that come at you, and you need to do that. I believe I'm a huge, to stay healthy, because that's a natural process.
Food is medicine.
Sure is. I grew up in an Indian family, and my parents are from the village in India. So all of the time, if there was an ailment or a cold, we'd have, lemon, ginger, honey, black pepper. When we get in the modern world, when we get sick, we start popping Advil and Tylenol. Well, sometimes maybe your body's telling you that you're dehydrated, you need water. Maybe you need you look at different antioxidant and food that could help with that. Whether it's, ginger, turmeric is a natural anti-inflammatory. Our house, we're into juicing. So, we have kale, apple, lemon, celery, ginger, lemon.
I hate kale.
Put it in the juicer, right? So I'm just saying that, sometimes in our modern world, we get so, we're looking at all these medicines and not, and, I think that it's important to try to go back to and think about as food as a source of medicine, and to fuel your body in positive ways, both proactively, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to get sick and then do this, but if you do it on a proactive basis, it's, things that we should be educating ourselves on.
I love this one. Teach your children to have a sense of humor.
Yeah. We've lost, I feel, the sense of humor in life. Look at today's world, Brian. It's pretty heavy. We got to laugh, right? We've lost that. And, I'm lucky that I grew up, my parents are funny. Like, we would laugh all the time because we would see the absurdities in certain situations. And, by design, my husband is funny. Like, it's a huge, we love to laugh because, we see things that are really funny, and we need our children to see, I see these kids that are growing up and they're too serious. And it's like, listen, you need to learn how to laugh, and laugh at yourself, and laugh at the world, and laugh at situations. Otherwise, it's going to be too intense. There's too much intensity. You need to laugh it off, because it's a way, it's a coping mechanism, and it's a way to understand human behavior.
I didn't like this last one, or second last one. Take cold showers and baths. I've always thought taking a cold shower was something that you did to, I don't know, whatever. Why taking cold showers?
Well, I've been studying this gentleman by the name of Wim Hof, and he teaches a deep breathing exercise that is sort of this release, and bringing good oxygen into your body. And I've been following him, and one of the things that he talked about and introduced was this induction of cold. And he's seen a direct correlation where people's mood enhancement, anxiety, depression, inflammation, ailments have decreased as a result of cold therapy. A lot of athletes, after they do extreme sports, also go into cold chambers as for muscle repair as well. So I've started to do that, taking cold showers, doing cold plunges at my house in the bathtub for about 30 seconds, 1 minute. And what it does also is it puts your body into a state of shock, and it forces you to deal with stress so that you're better equipped to deal with stressful situations when they arise. And it's been pretty remarkable. And then you feel like $1 million after. So I would encourage you to try it.
We're chatting tonight with Dr. Chitra Anand about turning 50 and some of the lessons that she's not learned, but really summarized in a fantastic article that she wrote about turning 50. We're going to take a final break and come back in just 2 minutes with some concluding comments from Dr. Chitra Anand about life and about thinking about life when you're 50 years old. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're talking about life tonight, really, with Dr. Chitra Anand, who turned 50 recently and wrote a really interesting article about turning 50 and how she felt that she didn't feel her age in many different ways, that she felt still like a teenager, but that her mind remained youthful, optimistic, hopeful, and grateful. And so she wrote down some things that she sort of has learned. Number one, progress is the key to happiness. Number two, surround yourself with people who truly value you. Number three, do hard things. Number four, energy and time are the most precious commodities. Number five, self-estimation is essential. Six, move your body daily and sweat. Seven, food is medicine. Eight, teach your children to have a sense of humor. Nine, take cold showers and baths. And number 10, which I love, live a life full of adventure. Adventure is thrilling, it's exciting, it's exhilarating. Mm-hmm. Have you lived a life of adventure?
I'd like to think I have. I'd like to think I have. And, it's an interesting last point because I remember, like, when as an adult did you truly feel excitement? Like, I look at my kids sometimes, Brian, and maybe you can remember this when your kids were younger, and they would come in and they're like so excited and exhilarated about something. Like, it's a strong emotion that, again, releases all sorts of positive neurotransmitters in your brain. But then something happens to us as adults, and then our excitement diminishes. We don't get excited or exhilarated. And, whether that be, our passion. And I think that's so important. Like, I still get so excited. And, I'm deeply passionate. I'm a passionate person. And I think that, you need to maintain that, because that exhilaration and adventure, and whether it's travel or learning something new or doing extreme sports, right, it's exhilarating. It does something. Your body's in a natural buzz and a natural high after the fact. And that's just like, it helps you maintain your youthfulness and your state of happiness. And this, so I would encourage you to just, ensure that, once a year, twice a year, whatever that is, that you do things that really exhilarate you, because it's such a wonderful, wonderful feeling.
I think that's a great way to end your list and a great way to end our show tonight. I remember I was playing with my kids one day. It was pouring rain. My father, their grandfather, was over, and it was pouring rain. I went out and we were just splashing around in the puddles on the street, my son and myself. And I came in and I had a great time. It was a lot of fun. And I came in and my father said, "It's great to see that you can still be a kid." And that was kind of fun. And then just the other day, I went out dancing to a band I love called That 70s Band, and was doing some disco, which is something I loved to do when I was a teenager and a young adult, and just forgetting about the world and dancing to some old music was so much fun. It was exhilarating. And neither of those maybe adventure, but they certainly were fun, and they were youthful, and they were childlike. And so I enjoyed them both.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that.
I think the other thing that's come out of this is that you do journal, you write stuff down, and you learn from your experiences, and you've created your own list. And so hearing your list is interesting and helpful. But I think what's probably most interesting, for me at least, is the fact of actually writing things down and creating the list that is authentically truthful for yourself was probably really helpful for you. And for me, those things have been helpful too. And so I think that everyone should sit down and write down their own list, which I guess is your self-estimation point.
Yes, and put a date to it, a timeline. Hold yourself accountable. Yes, for sure.
Dr. Chitra Anand, you don't look 50, but thank you so much for turning 50 and thinking about your life and thinking about your lessons learned, and for sharing those all with all of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videocasts are available on briancrombie.com. Good night, everybody. Dr. Chitra, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.